I'm excited about this session. We're going to talk a lot about AI and transformation. Let me first say, don't worry, I'm not going to do the thing where I bore you for ages about all of the hype that's going to come with AI, and I'm going to go on and on to sort of land all this. Don't worry, AI is going to change the world. And then, yeah, screw all that, right? You know all that, right? We've been talking about that for 2 years. Really what I want to make here is like 3 specific points as sort of provocations for the conversation that we'll have this afternoon. The first idea is that AI is a deeply convergent force. It forces things to be similar and ultimately to converge. The transformations and the fallout from this will be massive. And lastly, there's actually huge opportunities for us all as a result of this. So let's start with the first point here. The first big idea is that AI is a convergent force. And what we really mean by that is that it breaks down boundaries that previously existed. Things used to be separate devices, separate products, separate anything, and AI breaks that down. Here's an interesting example, because technology has always done this. This video is called the evolution of the desk, right? And what it shows is like how over time, all we've been doing has been digitizing reality into like specific things. And we were left at the end with effectively glasses, a laptop, and a phone, which is, if you think about it, how most of us just work at a given point. That has kind of become the dominant part of our life. And soon, our nice wristwatches will get replaced, and they'll be also automatic. And then we're done, right? Our desks are entirely done. But if we look at what's on this laptop, right? If we look there and we say, right, we've got like so many different products here. You've got your contacts app, your calendar, your notes, your email, your chat, your spreadsheet, all of that sort of stuff, right? This is what we've been doing for about 20 years. We've been basically just taking things that were once all separate and kind of bundling them together. We all remember Craigslist, right? The Craigslist used to be the single place we'd all go to do everything. And for years, the VC community was advising sort of B2C companies, we should unbundle Craigslist. And what did we get? We got a shitload of apps, right? Like a phenomenal amount of these things. And like a lot of these were successful, and ultimately Craigslist has survived, but for sure a lot of these other products have gone on and taken meaningful chunks. What was once missed connections is now Tinder or whatever, or so the kids say. The other advice you hear a lot is like take every single spreadsheet that a startup runs on and turn it into a dashboard or turn it into a dedicated SaaS app. And again, that was a reasonably profitable way to actually build software for a while. You'd be like, let's see, cap table management. Okay, let's build Carta, or like FP&A. Okay, let's build Runway or something like that. All of this is how people build software. We looked at the customer lifecycle and we sort of said, hey, let's build a different app for every single one of these things. So that now if you want to give gifts to your left-handed customers in Norway, you want to go to Gift Norway or whatever, right? Like, and we've just built hyper-specific things, right? And this results in extremely high-quality point solutions. And that's all great. So the last approach was, let's try and tackle the org chart. So you have people building, like, let's build a dedicated app for the VP of Eng or the CFO or whatever, and you have people who go at it kind of expense department by expense department, trying to maximize share of wallet. And all of this approach has just led to this extreme explosion, right? Just so many different products out there that we run, and it just grows and grows and grows, right? And over time, it has gotten to, any given SaaS company, I think current estimates run on between 55 and 60 SaaS apps is what it takes to run a business, right? And I think AI is going to change this in some way. So why is it going to change? Well, this is the idea of convergence. It's worth asking, why are all these products separate in the first place? Is it because they've got different owners? Is it because there's different buyers? Is there different interfaces? Or is it different back-end integrations? Or is it different expense departments? Or do they just have fundamentally different types of users? Like, it could be any of those things. And sure, historically, these are real differences that kept these things apart. But I think we're going to see these differences start to erode and start to fade away. Let's just take like user interface as one example, right? For the longest time, like we had every tech shift brings user interface. Remember Windows 95, anyone? We love it, right? It's back in the day. Actually, a lot of you are too young for that, but don't worry. I remember Windows 95. But yeah, and so I guess the desktop brought this level of UI, and then we went online and we got websites and blue links and all that sort of stuff. And then we went into, say, social, and we got like likes and shares and comments and quotes and all that sort of stuff. And then the iPhone came along, and all of a sudden we got touch and tap and swipe and all that sort of stuff, and pinch and zoom. And then lastly, we got like SaaS, which brought us dashboards, right? The one thing we all love, right? Like a good old dashboard. But like, that's, so every tech change has brought along a new sort of chunk of UI with it. And it's worth asking then, what is the AI UI, right? Where are we headed with all this? We actually don't really know. We've seen little bits of micro UI emerge, right? We know that AI generally tends to involve a lot of text wrangling. We know that it involves workflow design, dragging and dropping stuff together. And there's already been some like interesting developments there. But there's really just 2 dominant sort of factors that have emerged. First, and it sounds crazy to call this UI, but it's just the big, dopey text area that just says, what are you trying to do, right? And like, this is very similar to 1998 when Google launched this. Where if you remember, like, before Yahoo, we had a thing called, before Google, we had a thing called Yahoo, which organized the web into folders and portals and all that sort of stuff. And then Google was just like, here's a big text box. What are you looking for? Well, we've moved from search to do. And what we have is a world now where we say, write what you're trying to do into this box, and we'll do it for you. And what happens is people write stuff that they want to do. And all of a sudden, that really tests the boundary walls of your product. Because it's not really logical to say, like, make my T-shirt green in the photo. Great, it did that. And now upload it to Instagram. Oh, no, it doesn't do that. And you're like, what? Like, all of a sudden, we're into this guess world where we're supposed to know the boundary walls of the product. And people are going to write things into these text areas that they expect the product to be able to do, and the product will be like, I don't know what you're talking about. And some PM in that company is going to be like, we should probably actually do that. And that's going to be how these products evolve, right? Similarly, in B2B land, you might say, like, you might log into your HRIS tool and say, book me the day off after Pioneer because I want to go drinking or something like that, right? And sure, it'll probably do that. But then you say, and cancel all my meetings. It'll be like, sorry, I can't do that. And you're like, what? Like, it won't make sense. So I think this style of UI is actually going to force people to reimagine the boundary walls of their product. But the other big change we're seeing, the second one, is copilots, right? This idea of, like, we're going to have a nice sidebar, and that thing is what you can talk to learn how to use the product. And you saw, Paul showed some of the assistants that we're building into Intercom, into Fin earlier. And like, what's going on here is that you have your UI, but then you also have this incredible assistance layer that says, basically, tell me what you're trying to do, and I'll help you do it. Now, the interesting thing is that this erodes, like, the concept of being, like, good at software. You know, we all have a friend who's, like, good at Excel, right? And we go to them. Dan's my friend who's good at Excel, our CFO. But, like, we all have a friend who knows Excel, and then most of us just don't. Average sum, and that's about it, right? What's changing now is that you don't need to know it. You just basically say, here's the thing I'm trying to do, and it says, here's how you do it. Which means now all of a sudden we all know Excel. And that's just changing, right? So the idea that you have to learn how to use a Photoshop or an Excel or whatever, it's going to fade away, right? And that means that everyone can use everything, and then people expect everything to do everything. And that's going to cause convergence. I think that's going to really challenge here. Now, you might say, sure, Des, but how do we build all this? Like, what about, are you really going to build all these integrations so that Workday can connect to Google Calendar? Well, maybe. Like, maybe we will, right? There's going to be a lot of integrations that need to get built. And the reality is, this is actually not as challenging as it used to be. Code is, in some sense, getting easier to generate, right? It's getting a lot easier when it comes to this type of stuff, which is, you know, integrations, like where there's a well-defined API spec and just a data exchange or whatever. You can definitely do that. MCP servers are changing this too, right? The reality is code itself is kind of commoditizing, right? We can produce lots of it. This used to be the most expensive stuff to produce. This is why we, you know, engineers earn the big bucks, but it's definitely, and don't bother reading the code, it doesn't mean anything, I've already checked. Like, this is getting a lot easier. And it's not like, this isn't fiction, this is true. Like, Microsoft recently offered up, I think, 20 to 30% of their entire code base that's like net new code to the company is written by AI. And they're not alone, right? Google said something similar. I think they're like about a quarter. I think you've seen, like, is it Meta said that within a year and a half, more than half of their code is going to be generated by AI. These numbers are crazy, right? And then what, like, if you look then further afield into the startups and you say, like, well, what about the newest startups? What are they doing? Well, sure, the big old companies might only get a third, but, like, Y Combinator said that, like, a quarter of their startups were 95% AI code generated, right? That's transformative. On average, across our entire industry, I think with the figure we're seeing at the moment is like 41%. And, like, you might think this is all hype speak, right? This is literally not hype speak. This is happening right now. Last week, Anthropic, our friends, shared this video, right, which is they asked Claude Code to literally clone Claude.ai, which is their main product, their main signature flagship product, the thing that it gets all the hype and the buzz. They literally said, please clone this. And Sonnet sat down for 5.5 hours and did it. It wrote something like, was it 11,000 lines of code in 5.5 hours and produced a perfectly working version. So I hope you can see that convergence can come to not just the UI layer, but also to the engineering layer too. And that means that these boundary walls that we have, like, known and loved will just probably crumble and fade away. So what might that mean for the explosion that we're going through? Well, I think what you're going to see is a lot of these products will get merged, some of them will buy each other, some will fade away entirely, but the landscape ain't going to look the same. We're going to see a lot of these things fold into each other over time. And this is again, showing up in reality too. The market sentiment is really interesting on this. On one hand, the market is ripping. Even yesterday and today, about all-time stock highs, all-time history. Specifically, 7 companies are driving that. All of SaaS is basically down, pretty much, give or take a few edge cases. All of SaaS is down. Why? Because the smaller tools are at risk of just getting rolled up into something else, and no one's buying the AI stories of the big platforms right now. If you look at, and take your favorite big SaaS company, perhaps it's a platform, it's probably down between 20 and 30% year to date. So if the platforms are at risk and the products are at risk, what does this look like? Well, I think what happens is if products start to merge, then maybe the functions might start to merge too, the functions within a company. So every function in a company is basically like roles, goals, and products, basically this sort of sense of like who's doing it, what are they doing, and how are they doing it, right? And if people start to like all use the same product, there'll be implications in the org chart, because if the products converge, the roles start to converge, which means we'll look at all these skills somewhat differently, right? We'll see, like we'll ask ourselves, like, why are all these things totally different? Does it actually make sense? The answer is they're usually different because of different skills, different training, perhaps different salaries, different tooling, different access levels, different levels of experience. And they all sound, of course, that makes sense. So let's keep them separate, right? But jobs and roles aren't static anyway. Jobs and roles tend to evolve quite a bit over time. Most of us in this room do not have a job that existed like 15 years ago. Like all of our roles are pretty much new, right? Especially those of you who have AI in your title or fin in your title, right? So we've always seen this evolution, and every tech shift causes some of this, right? There's 3 things that usually happen. There's like jobs disappear, jobs disperse, and jobs distill. And it's good to talk about this openly so that we're prepared, right? When I say disappear, here's a funny job that once existed, right? If you've ever stepped into an elevator, would you believe that that big metal box used to require a real human to operate it to get you where you wanted to go? Imagine that. Our parents had to tell our kids, yes, son, this big metal box used to require a human to operate it. Now, I think we're all going to have that conversation with our kids too, I suggest, because there's a different metal box that also requires humans to operate it, and all of that's going to go away too, right? So some jobs will just categorically go. And that's just the reality. Some jobs disperse. That's different, right? For example, there was once a job where, like, being a typist. Being a typist was actually a job once, and you type, and now we all just type. That's it. Being a travel agent was a thing. We used to go to a travel agent, and now we all just do our own travel agent research. I would say, like, the last thing is when jobs kind of combine or merge, right? So what we see a lot is, like, in a scenario where you might have had a photographer and a videographer and a reporter or any version of that, what you would see is typically 5 different roles, and then you get one person with a cell phone able to do all 5. Or you might have say something like a restaurant critic might be a writer and a photographer and all this sort of stuff. The reality is we're all fucking restaurant critics now, right? We all snap, that was shit, all that sort of stuff, right? And that's just like, so I think we're going to see some jobs merging, some jobs disappearing, and some jobs becoming a part of everyone's job, right? Like I suspect in the future, like we're all going to be expected to be great at AI. We won't just have one dude in the corner called the AI guy. That won't work, right? So what's going to happen for folks like us? Well, I think it's reasonable to ask, why do all these jobs exist, right? Like we have a lot of them, right? We have a lot of different titles. We have pretty refined and optimally chopped up the experience, and we see all of these different roles, all different jobs, all different skill sets. And again, it's worth just reminding ourselves, why do they exist? Well, again, it's the same pattern. They've got different skills, different training, different access levels, different tooling, you name it, right? But also, there's a lot of similarity. There's a lot of similarity here as well. The similarity is things like they have the same product knowledge, right? They all need to, like your sales team and your support team both need to know how the product works. They need to have the same company policies. They need to have the same tone of voice, the same guidance or behavioral guidance you might give, right? So there's a lot of similarity and there's a few differences. The core similarities are important and the differences tend to be local. And that's important here. It's crucial to realize that, like the stuff above the fold, the training, the salary, the experience, the tooling, the access, whatever, they're largely human concerns, right? And when we realize this, we think that some of this might be erodable with AI. So, AI speaks every language. It works in every time zone. It works pretty hard. I think we'd all agree, right? So I'm not trying to argue that like your CFO is also your chef or whatever, right? But I think there's going to be some version of convergence here, and we'll see it. Now, it will have to stop somewhere. One of my favorite quotes in this is like Steve Jobs, who was famously asked once, like his question was like, "Hey Steve, what about convergence in Apple?" And he said, "Convergence means your TV is going to make toast." And it sounded ridiculous, right? But The reason it is ridiculous is because obviously you're not literally going to have toast coming out of your television. Why? Because it's in the wrong room and it's a weird thing to fucking do or whatever, right? All that sort of shit, right? But like, there is convergence within the rooms. There are smart TVs. There are toaster ovens. There are Vitamixes. There's some sense of you'll converge within a local scope. And I think that's important here, right? So when we talk about this, it's we should look towards convergence within the functions. That's, I think, where you're going to see it most importantly. Like, no one thinks NetSuite's going to write code or that GitHub's going to run payroll. No one expects that, right? But it's quite possible they'll expand into their adjacent functions. Like, as an example, if we take, say, productivity, right? It's reasonable to assume on the current trajectory that, like, your email, your chat, your Slack, your docs, your project management will all end up being one thing. And this isn't some wild proclamation. This is literally Notion's roadmap, right? This is what Grammarly are doing as well. This is like happening right now. Similarly, within engineering, it's not going to be the case that we have a dozen different disparate agents, one for doing JavaScript, one for doing Ruby, one for doing QA, one for doing production. That's not going to be the way it works. There'll be an agent who's fully authoritative to work across every part of the code base, and the changes at the team level will be to, like, AI-enabled full-stack engineers who are effective in every part of the code base. Similarly in marketing, we were not just going to go and have, like, again, the ads agent and the brand agent and the LP agent and the SEO agent. Someone's going to say, hey, let's just tell this agent everything we're trying to do, and it'll work out how to do those local instances. So you'll have a team of, like, AI-enabled full-stack marketers and a marketing agent, if you like, right? And lastly, obviously, you knew this was coming, right? There's this idea of, like, well, does it make sense to have different agents for every single point at which you engage in a customer? When you think about, like, hey, if they don't know each other, can you orchestrate them to talk across each other? Will they know that when you signed up? Do we have to share history? Is any of that going to work? Will all of it work? It's far more likely that there'll be an agent that actually delivers a brilliant customer experience, steeped in rich context and this idea of understanding all of a company's goals and doing the right thing at the right time. So the specificity of the customer-facing roles will probably erode. This is a really long way of saying I think we need to broaden our mandate. And what do I mean by that? What I'm saying is, I think the right way to think about the opportunity that's in front of us here is that everyone in this room, specifically those of you who are like further along in your fin journeys, it's not the case that you're just good at AI CS. It's actually the case that you're really, really good at AI and transforming businesses and transforming customer conversations and delivering insane results. And I think it's important that we understand that that matters across an entire company and not just within one little function, right? It actually matters across the entire customer lifecycle. The thing that's changed is we historically have thought of, like, people as being, like, T-shaped, right? This idea that, like, you have a general sense of knowledge, but you go really deep in a specific function. Well, I think AI is changing that. AI lets us all go quite deep in all areas. And yeah, there's still going to be specialism, but I think we're so much more capable than we were. So when we think about, say, all these reports say all these jobs are going to die out in certain times, and they give you all these proclamations and all that doom and gloom nonsense that I'm just sick of hearing anyway, I think the one thing that I take from all this is the people who benefit most in these times of change are the ones who adapt quickest, and they take the upside first as well. I think there's, like, if you ask how does this all play out in our world, I think it means, companies are going to look around and say who's been the best at applying AI CS and who's been the best at applying AI to customer. And that is undeniably going to be all of you. I think that's a huge opportunity. Like, this is a time of creative destruction. We're going to see a lot of the AI is a hype bubble. It's going to pop. Companies will fade. Some companies will die, etc. That's all going to happen. But another more important thing is happening as well. With all of this increased capability, I believe we're heading into a sort of generalist renaissance, right? This idea that we can actually do so much more than we could have 2 years ago. We can be so much more effective in every part of our function than we ever would have been before. And what that means is for the folks who embrace the change and for the folks who roll with it, the opportunities are going to be massive. I think it's there. I'm sure you can tell I don't really buy the doom and gloom about AI, right? But this is an incredible time to work in this industry, and it's an incredible time rich with opportunity for all of us. And I hope that we collectively make the most of every piece of that. And really, that's all I wanted to share with you today. So I just want to say thanks so much for listening to that.